The golden lights of the Riverside Hotel ballroom sparkled like diamonds across the polished marble floor. 200 of New York's wealthiest people filled the space, their designer gowns and expensive suits creating a sea of elegance. The annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, where million-dollar donations were made as casually as ordering coffee. Damian Cross stood near the bar, swirling his whiskey and checking his platinum watch for the third time in 10 minutes. At 32, he owned one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America, but tonight he felt completely out of place. These charity events were always the same boring routine. Rich people talking about how much money they had while pretending to care about causes they'd forgotten by morning. His assistant had insisted he attend. "It's good for your image," she'd said. "The board wants to see you doing more community involvement." Damian had rolled his eyes but agreed. Anything to keep the investors happy and his company's stock rising. The evening's entertainment had been dragging on forever. A soprano singer had performed 3 songs that all sounded identical to him. Now some old businessman was giving a speech about childhood education that seemed to go on and on. Damian pulled out his phone, thinking about leaving early. That's when he heard it. Piano music drifted across the ballroom, so soft at first he almost missed it. But there was something different about these notes. They weren't the background music that usually played at these events. Someone was actually playing, and they were playing beautifully. Damian looked around until he spotted her. In the far corner of the ballroom, almost hidden behind a marble pillar, sat a young woman at a grand piano. Her long dark hair fell like a curtain around her face as she played. She wore a simple black dress that looked elegant, but not flashy like the other women's gowns. There was something peaceful about the way she moved her fingers across the keys, like the music was flowing directly from her heart. Most people hadn't even noticed her playing. They were too busy talking and laughing, making their social connections and business deals. But Damian found himself walking closer, drawn by the melody she was creating. He'd never been particularly interested in classical music, but this was different. This made him feel something he couldn't quite name. The woman's eyes were closed as she played, completely lost in her own world. She seemed to forget that hundreds of people surrounded her. The music grew stronger, more passionate, and Damian realized he'd been holding his breath. But then the evening's formal program began. The master of ceremonies walked to the microphone at the front of the ballroom, and the woman's playing grew softer. Damian watched as she glanced around nervously, clearly not wanting to disturb the main event. Something about her hesitation irritated him. Here was someone with obvious talent, hiding in the corner while mediocre performers took center stage. The whole situation struck him as ridiculous. Why should real artistry take a back seat to boring speeches and average entertainment? Without thinking, Damian stepped forward. His voice carried across the ballroom as he shouted, "I'll marry you if you play." The entire room fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the master of ceremonies turned to stare at him. Damian felt heat rise in his cheeks as he realized what he'd just done. The whiskey had made him bolder than usual, but there was no taking back those words now. 200 pairs of eyes were looking at him, then shifting to the woman at the piano. She had stopped playing completely. Her hands rested motionless on the keys as she stared at him with wide, surprised eyes. For a moment that felt like forever, nobody moved or spoke. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of looking embarrassed or angry, the woman smiled. It wasn't a big, dramatic smile, but something mysterious and knowing, like she was in on a secret that nobody else understood. She stood up slowly, smoothing down her dress. When she spoke, her voice was clear and confident, carrying easily across the silent ballroom. "One piece," she said simply. The crowd began to murmur. Damian nodded, not trusting himself to speak again. He had no idea what he'd gotten himself into, but he was committed now. The woman sat back down at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. When she began to play, the entire atmosphere of the room changed. The music that poured from the piano was unlike anything Damian had ever heard. It started gentle and romantic, but grew more complex and powerful with each passing moment. Her fingers moved across the keys with incredible speed and precision, creating layers of sound that seemed impossible for just 2 hands to produce. Damian recognized the piece as something classical, though he couldn't name it. The melody soared and dipped, telling a story without words. Sometimes it was tender and heartbreaking, other times triumphant and bold. The woman's whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly as she poured her soul into every note. Looking around the ballroom, Damien saw that everyone was completely captivated. Conversations had stopped entirely. Waitstaff stood frozen with their trays. Even the businessmen who usually couldn't sit still for 5 minutes were listening intently. But it was more than just the technical skill that held everyone spellbound. There was raw emotion in every note she played. Joy, sadness, hope, longing. All of it flowed through the music and straight into the hearts of everyone listening. As the piece built to its climax, Damien felt something shift inside his chest. He'd spent years building walls around his emotions, focusing only on business and success. But this music was breaking through those barriers, making him feel things he'd forgotten how to feel. The final notes rang out across the ballroom, lingering in the air like the last rays of sunset. For several seconds, nobody moved. The silence was complete and reverent. Then the applause began. It started with one person clapping, then two. Then suddenly the entire ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. People were standing, whistling, shouting their approval. Some women were wiping tears from their eyes. Damien clapped harder than anyone, his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with the whiskey. The woman at the piano stood and gave a small, graceful bow. Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes sparkled with the aftermath of the performance. She looked directly at him across the crowded room. That mysterious smile returned to her lips as she mouthed the words "thank you" in his direction. Then she gathered her small purse and walked toward the ballroom's exit. Damien tried to follow her through the crowd, but people kept stopping him to comment on what had just happened. By the time he reached the lobby, she was gone. "Sir?" His assistant appeared at his elbow. "The photographers want to know if you have any comment about your announcement." Damien looked around and noticed several people holding up phones, clearly having recorded the whole thing. A few professional photographers were snapping pictures of him. The reality of what he'd done began to sink in. He'd just publicly promised to marry a woman whose name he didn't even know. A woman who had just delivered the most incredible musical performance he'd ever witnessed. A woman who had somehow managed to touch his heart with nothing more than a piano and her extraordinary talent. "Find out who she is," he told his assistant quietly. "Already working on it, sir." As Damien left the hotel that night, he couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious pianist. Her music still echoed in his mind, and he knew that his life had somehow changed forever in those few magical minutes. Damien woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment as he grabbed the device, squinting at the screen. 15 missed calls from his assistant, 12 from his publicist, and dozens of text messages. His heart sank as he remembered the night before. The charity gala, the beautiful pianist, his very public and very foolish declaration of marriage. Before he could call anyone back, his apartment door burst open. His assistant Rebecca rushed in, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her arms full of newspapers and tablets. "We have a situation," she announced, spreading the papers across his marble kitchen counter. A big one. Damien walked over in his pajamas and stared at the headlines. Tech billionaire's marriage proposal shocks charity gala. Mystery pianist wins Damien Cross's heart. The woman who tamed the untamable bachelor. "Oh no," he muttered, picking up one of the newspapers. There was a large photo of him shouting across the ballroom, and another of the dark-haired woman at the piano. "Please tell me this isn't as bad as it looks." Rebecca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's worse. The video has been shared over 2 million times since last night. Entertainment Tonight wants an exclusive interview. Your company stock jumped 3% this morning because investors think you're finally settling down." Damien sat heavily on one of his bar stools. "This is insane. I made one stupid comment after too much whiskey. Well, that stupid comment is now national news." Rebecca pulled out her tablet and showed him social media posts. "Look at these comments. People are calling it the most romantic proposal of the century." "Proposal? I didn't propose. I just said I'd marry her if she played. The internet doesn't see a difference." Rebecca scrolled through more posts. "There are already fan pages dedicated to you two as a couple." Someone started a hashtag. "Wedding Watch 2025. Damien rubbed his temples, feeling a headache forming. What do we know about her? Rebecca's expression grew more serious. That's where things get complicated. Her name is Elena Vasquez. She's 28, originally from Spain, but she's been living in New York for 5 years. Okay, that doesn't sound so complicated. She's a professional pianist, Damien. Not just any pianist. She's actually quite famous in classical music circles. She performs under a different stage name, which is why we didn't recognize her immediately. Damien felt a flicker of interest despite his panic. She's really a professional musician? One of the best in the world, according to the research I did this morning. She's performed with major orchestras across Europe and America. Critics call her a once-in-a-generation talent. Then why was she playing alone in the corner at a charity gala? Rebecca hesitated. That's where it gets really complicated. Elena Vasquez is also the daughter of Carlos Vasquez. The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Carlos Vasquez? The hotel magnate? Your biggest business rival, yes, Damien. Stared at the newspaper photo of Elena. You're telling me I accidentally challenged the daughter of the man who's been trying to destroy my company for the past 3 years? It appears so. And there's more. Carlos Vasquez has already released a statement saying he's delighted by this unexpected development and looks forward to welcoming Damien into the family. This keeps getting worse. Rebecca pulled up another news article on her tablet. Elena herself hasn't made any public statements yet. But according to her manager, she's supposed to start a major concert tour next month. European capitals, then back to the US for a finale at Carnegie Hall. Damien's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and groaned. It's my father. Good luck, Rebecca said, gathering up the newspapers. Damien! His father's voice boomed through the phone before Damien could even say hello. What in the world were you thinking last night? Dad, I can explain. Explain? Son, this is the best publicity you've gotten in years. Do you know how many investors have called me this morning? They love that you're finally showing some maturity, settling down with a nice girl. She's not just a nice girl, Dad. She's Carlos Vasquez's daughter. There was a pause. Well, that could be interesting for business. Interesting? He's been trying to buy out our suppliers for months. Sometimes the best way to end a business rivalry is through family connections. This could work in our favor. Damien couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want me to actually go through with this? I want you to be smart about this situation. The whole world is watching now. How you handle this will affect not just your personal reputation, but the company's reputation too. After hanging up with his father, Damien tried to focus on his normal morning routine. He went to his home gym but couldn't concentrate on his workout. He attempted to review some business reports, but the numbers seemed to blur together on the page. Every few minutes, his phone would ring with another interview request or congratulations from a business associate. Around noon, Rebecca knocked on his office door. She's here. Who's here? Elena Vasquez. She's downstairs asking to see you. Damien's stomach dropped. She's here, now? Security called from the lobby. Should I have them send her up? Damien looked down at his casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt. Give me 5 minutes to change. Damien, she specifically said to tell you not to dress up for her. Despite everything, he smiled slightly. Send her up. While waiting for the elevator, Damien tried to prepare himself for what Elena might say. Would she be angry? Embarrassed? Demanding that he publicly apologize and retract his statement? The elevator doors opened and Elena stepped into his penthouse. In daylight, wearing simple jeans and a blue sweater, she was even more beautiful than he remembered. But her expression was serious, almost stern. We need to talk, she said without any greeting. Would you like some coffee? Water? I'd like you to fix this mess you created. Damien gestured toward his living room and they both sat on opposite ends of his large sofa. I'm sorry about last night. I'd had too much to drink and I wasn't thinking clearly. Clearly. Elena's voice was crisp with a slight accent that made her words sound more elegant. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? I can imagine it's been disruptive. Disruptive? Elena stood up and began pacing. I woke up to 47 reporters camped outside my apartment building. My phone has been ringing nonstop. My manager has fielded over 100 interview requests. There are photographers following me everywhere. I'm really sorry. I never intended. Do you know what I do for a living, Mr. Cross? You're a pianist. A very talented one. I'm a classical musician. I've spent 15 years building my career on my talent alone, not on publicity stunts or media attention. I perform under a stage name specifically to keep my personal life separate from my father's business world. Damien began to understand the full scope of what his impulsive comment had caused. Your career is built on your artistic reputation. Exactly. And now, thanks to you, every review of my performances will mention this ridiculous situation. Every interview will be about my personal life instead of my music. What can I do to fix this? Elena stopped pacing and looked directly at him. Hold a press conference. Tell everyone that you were drunk and made a mistake. Say it was a joke that got out of hand. Okay, I can do that. And issue a formal apology to me for the embarrassment. Of course. Elena seemed surprised that he was agreeing so easily. She sat back down, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Can I ask you something? Damien said. Why did you agree to play last night? You could have just ignored me. Elena was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Maybe I was tired of hiding in the corner. Maybe I wanted to show those people what real music sounds like. She looked at him with curiosity. Can I ask you something? Why did you say it? Honestly? I was frustrated watching you hold back your talent while mediocre performers got all the attention. You were clearly the most gifted person in that room. You don't even know me. I know you made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Your music was extraordinary. Elena studied his face as if trying to determine whether he was being sincere. You really meant that? Every word. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City hummed with its usual energy, but inside the penthouse felt peaceful. Your father called mine this morning, Elena said suddenly. What did he say? That he thinks this could be beneficial for both families' business interests. Damien groaned. I'm sorry about that too. Sometimes I think my father only sees life in terms of profit margins. Mine is the same way. He's already talking about joint ventures and market opportunities. Elena shook her head. They're both acting like we're actually engaged. We could just ignore them, could we? The whole world is watching us now. Every move we make will be analyzed and discussed. Damien realized she was right. Even after they held the press conference and cleared up the misunderstanding, the media would continue to follow both of them, looking for any hint of a real relationship. This is going to affect both our lives for months, Elena said, echoing his thoughts. Maybe longer. Elena looked out the windows at the city below. I have a concert tour starting in 3 weeks. 23 cities across Europe, then back here for Carnegie Hall. That's amazing. Congratulations. It was supposed to be the biggest tour of my career, the culmination of everything I've worked toward. She turned back to him. Now it's going to be overshadowed by this circus. Looking at Elena's frustrated expression, Damien felt genuinely sorry for what his thoughtless comment had done to her carefully planned life. She was a serious artist who deserved to have her work judged on its merits, not on tabloid speculation about her love life. But he also couldn't forget the way her music had made him feel the night before. For the first time in years, something had touched his heart in a way that wasn't related to business success or financial gain. What if we didn't fight it? He heard himself say. What do you mean? What if we let people think we're together for a while? Just until the attention dies down and you can focus on your tour. Elena stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. You want to pretend we're engaged? Not engaged, just dating, getting to know each other. It would give you time to plan how you want to handle the media attention around your tour. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, is it? Think about it, right now. If we announce this was all a mistake, the story becomes about how the famous billionaire humiliated the talented pianist. You become the victim in the narrative. Elena's expression shifted slightly, showing she was considering his words. But if we let people think we're genuinely interested in each other, then the story becomes about a romantic courtship. You're not a victim. You're the woman who captured the heart of one of America's most eligible bachelors. I don't want to be known for capturing anyone's heart. I want to be known for my music, and you will be. But this way you control the narrative instead of letting the media create it for you. Elena was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking through all the implications. Finally, she looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. What would you get out of this arrangement? Damien considered her question carefully. Own. Stully. My board has been pressuring me to improve my public image. They think my reputation as a playboy makes investors nervous about the company's stability. So this would be a business arrangement for you, for both of us. You get to control how this story affects your career. And I get to show my board that I'm capable of a mature relationship. Elena stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city while she thought. Damien watched her, admiring the graceful way she moved and the intelligent concentration on her face. This is crazy, she said finally. Probably. If we did this, and I'm not saying yes, there would have to be very clear boundaries. Whatever you're comfortable with. Elena turned back to face him. I need to think about it. This isn't a decision I can make right now. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Elena gathered her purse to leave, she paused at the elevator doors. Can I ask you one more thing? Anything. When you shouted across that ballroom last night, did you mean it? Even for just that moment? Damien met her eyes and answered with complete honesty. In that moment, listening to you play, I think I would have promised you anything. Elena's expression softened slightly. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. After she left, Damien stood at his windows looking out at the city, wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. But for the first time since waking up to the media chaos, he felt hopeful instead of panicked. Maybe this crazy situation would work out after all. Elena called the next evening just as Damien was finishing a conference call with his Tokyo office. Her voice sounded different over the phone, more formal, like she was reading from a prepared script. I've decided to accept your proposal, she said. The business arrangement, I mean. That's great. I think it's the right choice for both of us. I have conditions, a lot of them. Damien smiled despite himself. I wouldn't expect anything less. Should we meet to discuss them? Tomorrow. My apartment. 7 o'clock. And bring a lawyer. A lawyer. Elena, this isn't that complicated. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. With everything in writing. The next evening, Damien arrived at Elena's apartment building in Soho carrying a briefcase and feeling oddly nervous. Her building was older, with exposed brick walls and large industrial windows, the kind of place artists and musicians gravitated toward because of the character and the reasonable rent. Elena's apartment was on the 4th floor, and she answered the door wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore no makeup except a touch of lip gloss. She looked beautiful and completely natural. Come in, she said, stepping aside. I hope you don't mind, but I asked my lawyer to join us too. Her apartment was exactly what Damien had expected, filled with music. A beautiful grand piano dominated the living room, and sheet music was scattered across every surface. Bookshelves lined the walls packed with books about music theory, composer biographies, and literature in both English and Spanish. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. A middle-aged woman with gray hair and a serious expression stood up from the sofa as they entered. Damien, this is Patricia Ruiz, my attorney, Elena said. Patricia, Damien Cross. They shook hands and Patricia gestured toward the coffee table where several documents were already laid out. Elena has been very thorough, Patricia said with a slight smile. She's outlined exactly what she expects from this arrangement. Damien's lawyer, Robert Chen, was already examining the papers. This is quite detailed, he commented. I believe in being clear about expectations, Elena said, sitting in an armchair across from Damien. The first section covers the timeline. 3 months maximum. That will take us through my European tour dates and give enough time for media interest to fade. 3 months seems reasonable, Damien agreed. Section 2 covers public appearances. We'll attend no more than 4 social events together. I get to approve which events in advance. What about business functions? Sometimes I have company events that would benefit from having a date. Elena consulted her notes. Company functions count toward the 4 events unless they're directly related to charitable causes. I'm willing to make exceptions for charity work. Damien found himself impressed by her thoughtfulness. You've really considered every angle. Section 3 is about personal space. We maintain separate residences at all times. No overnight stays, no unannounced visits. All meetings are scheduled in advance. That sounds a bit formal for people who are supposed to be dating. Elena's expression remained serious. This isn't real dating, Mr. Cross. This is a business arrangement designed to solve a mutual problem. Right. Of course. Damien felt oddly disappointed by her clinical approach, though he couldn't explain why. Section 4 covers physical contact. Minimal contact only, and only when necessary for public appearances. Hand-holding and brief kisses on the cheek are acceptable for photographs, but nothing beyond that. Patricia leaned forward. Elena wants to be very clear that this arrangement is strictly professional. I understand, Damien said, though something about the restriction bothered him. What about interviews? The media will want to talk to both of us. Section 5 addresses media contact, Elena continued. We each handle our own press individually. No joint interviews, no shared social media posts, no coordinated statements unless absolutely necessary. Robert looked up from the documents. This is very protective of both parties' individual interests. I'm impressed. Section 6 deals with finances. All expenses for public appearances are split equally. No gifts exchanged except what's necessary for maintaining the appearance of a relationship. What kind of gifts would be necessary? Damien asked. Flowers for public events. Maybe small jewelry that can be returned afterward. Nothing personal or expensive. Returned afterward? This arrangement has an end date, Mr. Cross. I don't want to keep reminders of it. Her words stung more than Damien expected. He was used to business negotiations, but there was something harsh about planning the end of their fake relationship before it even began. The final section covers confidentiality, Elena said. Neither of us discusses the details of this arrangement with anyone outside our legal teams. If asked, we met, felt a connection, and decided to see where things led. And after 3 months, we realized we're too different. I'm focused on my music career. You're focused on your business. We remain friends but decide to pursue other relationships. You've thought of everything. I hope so. They spent another hour going through the details with their lawyers, making small adjustments and clarifications. When everything was finalized, they each signed multiple copies of the agreement. So, Damien said as the lawyers packed up their briefcases, when do we start? Saturday night. There's a gallery opening in Chelsea that several society reporters will be covering. It's perfect for our first public appearance as a couple. Sounds good. Should I pick you up? That would be appropriate, yes, 7:30. After the lawyers left, Elena walked Damien to the door. Thank you for being reasonable about all the conditions, she said. They make sense. You're protecting both of us. Exactly. As they stood in her doorway, Damien found himself reluctant to leave. The apartment felt warm and welcoming, so different from his sterile penthouse. Elena, can I ask you something personal? She tensed slightly. What? Why didn't you want to use your father's connections to advance your music career? Elena was quiet for a moment. Because I needed to know that my success was real. That people loved my music, not my family name. And you've proven that. You're internationally recognized for your talent. I've proven it to everyone except myself, I think. There was something vulnerable in her admission that made Damien want to comfort her. But their brand new agreement specifically prohibited personal intimacy. Your music the other night. It was incredible. I've never heard anything like it. Thank you. That means more than you know. Have you always wanted to be a musician? Elena smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Always. I started playing when I was 4. My mother used to say I spoke music before I spoke words. What does your mother think about all this media attention? Elena's expression grew sad. She passed away when I was 16, but she would have found this whole situation very amusing. She always said I was too serious and needed more adventure in my life. I'm sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago. But sometimes I wonder what she would think about the choices I've made. Standing in the doorway, talking about Elena's mother and her music, Damien felt a strange intimacy developing between them. It was dangerous territory given their carefully outlined agreement. I should go, he said. I'll see you Saturday night, 7:30 sharp. And Damien? Yes? Wear something nice but not too flashy. We want to look like a real couple, not a business merger. Saturday evening arrived quickly. Damien spent longer than usual getting ready, finally settling on a dark gray suit with a simple white shirt and no tie. He wanted to look elegant but approachable. Elena's building didn't have a doorman, so he texted her when he arrived. She came downstairs wearing a stunning navy blue dress that hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and she wore simple pearl earrings that caught the light when she moved. You look beautiful, he said, and meant it completely. Thank you. You look very handsome yourself. They rode to the gallery in Damien's car, making small talk about the artist whose work they were going to see. Elena had researched the exhibition thoroughly and spoke knowledgeably about contemporary art. Damien found himself genuinely interested in her opinions, not just pretending for their arrangement. The gallery was crowded with New York's art world elite. As soon as they walked in together, Damien noticed people pointing and whispering. Someone took their picture before they'd even removed their coats. "Here we go," Elena said quietly. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified. But I'll manage." They spent the next 2 hours circulating through the crowd, looking at paintings and sculptures while people watched their every interaction. Elena was a natural at these social situations, Damien realized. She was charming without being fake, intelligent without being pretentious. When they stood close together examining a particular painting, Damien caught the scent of her perfume, something light and floral that suited her perfectly. When she laughed at something he said, he found himself wanting to hear the sound again. "This is going better than I expected," he told her during a quiet moment. "You're a good actor," she replied. "So are you." But as the evening progressed, Damien began to wonder how much of it was acting. Elena's smile seemed genuine when she looked at him. Their conversation flowed naturally, and she even took his arm without prompting when they walked from room to room. During the ride home, they were both quiet, processing their first public appearance as a couple. "The photographers got some good shots," Elena said finally. "I saw at least 3 society reporters making notes. Mission accomplished." Then, "Yes, mission accomplished." But something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with that assessment. Over the next few weeks, they attended 2 more events together, a charity dinner and a book launch party for a mutual acquaintance. Each time they played their roles perfectly. The media coverage was exactly what they'd hoped for, portraying them as an elegant, sophisticated couple who seemed genuinely interested in each other. Between public appearances, they barely communicated except to coordinate schedules. Elena was preparing for her European tour, spending long hours in rehearsal. Damien was dealing with a major product launch at his company, but he found himself thinking about her at odd moments. When he heard classical music in a restaurant, he wondered what Elena would think of the performance. When he walked past Lincoln Center, he imagined her on stage there, commanding the attention of thousands of audience members. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Elena called him with an unexpected request. "I have a problem," she said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "My rehearsal pianist canceled at the last minute. Food poisoning. I have a dress rehearsal tomorrow for my tour opening and I need someone to turn pages for me." "Turn pages?" "Someone needs to sit next to me during the performance and turn the sheet music pages when I nod. It's not complicated, but it requires someone who can read music and follow along with the performance." "I can't read music, Elena." "I know, but I can teach you enough to get through tomorrow's rehearsal. It's just one piece, the Rachmaninoff concerto I played the night we met. Why don't you ask someone from your usual musical circle?" There was a pause. "Because if anyone sees us together at my rehearsal, it will look natural given our supposed relationship. If I ask a colleague to help, it just creates questions I don't want to answer right now." Damien realized she was asking him to cross one of their carefully drawn boundaries. They'd agreed to keep their professional lives separate. "Please, Damien. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate." Something in her voice convinced him. "What time should I be there?" 2:00 tomorrow afternoon. Carnegie Hall, stage door." The next day, Damien found himself in one of the most famous concert halls in the world, sitting on stage next to Elena at a magnificent concert grand piano. The hall was empty except for a few technicians and Elena's manager, but the space felt magical anyway. "Just watch my left shoulder," Elena explained. "When I tilt it slightly toward you, turn the page. Don't worry about the music itself, just follow my cues." As she began to play, Damien was transported back to that first night at the charity gala. But this time, sitting so close to her, he could see the incredible technical skill required for every phrase. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision that seemed impossible, and her whole body moved with the music. When she tilted her shoulder, he turned the page as instructed. Then he found himself actually following along with the music, beginning to understand the structure and flow of the piece. During a particularly dramatic passage, Elena's eyes were closed in concentration. A strand of hair fell across her face, and without thinking, Damien gently brushed it back behind her ear. Elena's eyes flew open, and she missed a note, the first mistake he'd ever heard her make. She looked at him with surprise and something else he couldn't identify. "Sorry," he whispered. She smiled and continued playing, but the moment had changed something between them. The rest of the rehearsal felt charged with a new awareness of each other. Afterward, as they walked through the empty halls of Carnegie Hall, Elena was unusually quiet. "Thank you for helping me today," she finally said. "Thank you for letting me see you work. It was incredible. I've never had someone turn pages for me who wasn't a musician. How did I do? Better than I expected? You were really paying attention to the music, not just waiting for my cues." They reached the stage door, and Elena paused with her hand on the handle. "Damien, what you did during the performance, when you moved my hair, I said I was sorry. I shouldn't have done that. No, it's not that. It's just, it didn't feel like acting." Damien met her eyes. It wasn't. For a moment they stood facing each other in the empty hallway, both acknowledging that something had shifted in their carefully controlled arrangement. "My plane to Europe leaves tomorrow," Elena said quietly. "I know. Your tour starts in Paris. This complicates things. Does it have to?" Elena looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to separate what's real from what we're pretending anymore. Maybe we don't have to. Our agreement was made by two people who barely knew each other. Maybe it's time to renegotiate." Elena looked up at him with those expressive dark eyes that had captivated him from the first moment. He saw her play. "I'll be gone for 6 weeks. No, when I come back, maybe we can talk about this. Really talk about it. I'd like that." As Elena flew to Europe the next day, Damien realized that their business arrangement had become something neither of them had planned for. The question was whether what they'd found together was strong enough to survive. 6 weeks apart and the complications of their very different worlds. Elena had been in Europe for 3 weeks when Damien found himself watching her performances, online every night. She was touring through Paris, Vienna, and London, and each concert was more spectacular than the last. Music critics were calling it the tour of the decade. Social media was filled with videos of standing ovations and rave reviews. But what struck Damien most was how alive Elena looked on stage. Through the screen, he could see the pure joy on her face as she played. This was who she really was, not the careful, controlled woman he'd made a business arrangement with, but a passionate artist completely in her element. They'd been texting sporadically during her tour. Nothing romantic or personal, just brief updates about their schedules and tour progress. But Damien found himself looking forward to those simple messages more than he cared to admit. "Good luck tonight in Vienna," he'd text before her performances. "Thank you. Wish you could hear the acoustics in this hall," she'd reply. It wasn't much, but it kept him connected to her world in a small way. Then everything changed with one phone call. Damien was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when Rebecca burst in without knocking, her face pale with worry. "We have a major problem," she announced, throwing a tablet down on his desk. "Victoria Sterling is talking to reporters." Damien looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Victoria Sterling was his former business partner and ex-girlfriend, someone who knew far too much about his personal life and had ended their relationship bitterly 2 years earlier. The headline read, "Ex-girlfriend claims billionaires. Romance is fake. She's giving an exclusive interview to Entertainment Weekly." Rebecca continued. "She's claiming that your relationship with Elena is completely fabricated for publicity purposes." "What exactly is she saying? That you're incapable of real emotional connection? That you view relationships as business transactions? That Elena is probably being paid to pretend to date you?" Damien scrolled through the article, his anger building with each paragraph. Victoria had always been vindictive, but this was crossing every line. "There's more," Rebecca said grimly. "She's provided them with photos." "What kind of photos?" "Pictures of you and Elena signing documents with lawyers present. She somehow got shots through your apartment windows when Elena was there with Patricia Ruiz." Damien's blood ran cold. "How did she get those?" "She must have hired a private investigator. The photos are grainy but clear enough to raise serious questions." The implications hit him immediately. If people believed Victoria's claims, Elena would be portrayed as a gold digger or an opportunist. Her reputation as a serious artiste would be destroyed. "Have you contacted Elena?" "I tried. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. She's probably in rehearsal for tonight's performance in Vienna." Damien stood up and began pacing. "We need to get ahead of this story." "How?" The photos look very damaging. Two people don't usually sign legal documents unless they're making some kind of business deal. Maybe I should just confirm that it started as an arrangement but became real. Rebecca shook her head. That still makes Elena look calculating. Either way, she comes out looking bad. Damien's phone rang. Elena's name appeared on the screen and he answered immediately. Elena, I'm so sorry. I don't know how Victoria got those photos. I'm flying back to New York tonight. Elena's voice was tight with controlled anger. Cancel the rest of my tour. Don't cancel your tour because of this. We can fix it. Fix it? Damien. There are photographers outside my hotel right now shouting questions about whether you're paying me to date you. My manager has fielded calls from 60 different media outlets in the past 2 hours. We'll hold a press conference. We'll explain everything. Explain what? That we signed a contract to fake a relationship? That will make things worse, not better. Damien could hear the exhaustion and frustration in her voice. Elena, I'm going to make this right. How? This Victoria woman knows details that only someone very close to you would know. She's telling reporters that you bragged to her about manipulating the media with a fake romance. I never said anything like that to Victoria. She's lying. Maybe so, but the photos don't lie. They show us signing legal documents, Damien. How do we explain that away? We tell the truth. That we were protecting ourselves legally, but our feelings became real. You think anyone will believe that now? Damien didn't have a good answer. The situation looked terrible from every angle. I land at JFK tomorrow morning, Elena continued. I want to meet with you and our lawyers immediately. We need to figure out how to end this arrangement and minimize the damage to both our reputations. Elena, wait. But she'd already hung up. The next 24 hours were a nightmare. The story exploded across social media and entertainment news outlets. Fake romance began trending on Twitter. Business reporters started questioning whether Damien's personal life reflected poorly on his professional judgment. By the time Elena arrived at his apartment the next evening, Damien hadn't slept in 36 hours. She looked equally exhausted, wearing simple black pants and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. But even tired and stressed, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I'm sorry about your tour, he said as she sat down on his sofa. 6 years of planning. Down the drain. Elena's voice was flat with disappointment. Do you know what Vienna's concert hall means to classical musicians? Playing there was supposed to be the highlight of my career. You can reschedule. Once this blows over, can I? My reputation is completely destroyed, Damien. Half the music world thinks I'm a fraud who used a fake romance to gain publicity. The other half thinks I'm a gold digger who got caught. Damien sat down across from her. I take full responsibility for all of this. Victoria is targeting me and you got caught in the crossfire. Why does she hate you so much? We dated for about a year. When I ended things, she didn't take it well. She's been trying to damage my business reputation ever since. And now she's succeeded in damaging mine too. They sat in silence for several minutes. Outside the windows, New York City continued its endless motion, but inside the apartment felt frozen in time. I've been thinking during the flight, Elena said finally. There might be a way to salvage this situation. I'm listening. We give the media what they want. A big dramatic ending to our relationship, what do you mean? Elena pulled out her phone and showed him a social media post. Look at the comments on this article about us. People are invested in this story now. They want to know how it ends. Damien read through dozens of comments from people defending their relationship, criticizing Victoria, and expressing hope that he and Elena would survive the scandal. So we give them a love story, Elena continued. We appear together at some public event. We look happy and united despite the controversy. Then a few weeks later, we announced that while our relationship was real, we've decided we're too different to make it work long term. That could work, Damien said slowly. It protects both our reputations. Exactly. You're not the manipulative businessman Victoria painted you as, and I'm not the calculating gold digger. We're just two people who tried to make a relationship work, but realized we weren't compatible. It was a smart plan. It would give them both a graceful exit from the situation. So why did Damien feel so disappointed? When would we do this public appearance? He asked. There's a benefit concert for music education next Saturday at Lincoln Center. I was supposed to perform, but I pulled out when all this started. If I go back and perform with you in the audience supporting me, it sends a strong message. And then, 2 weeks later, we announce our amicable split. You focus on your business, I focus on my music. End of story. Damien nodded. It's a good plan. I'm glad you agree. As Elena gathered her things to leave, Damien found himself reluctant to let her go. These might be some of the last private moments they'd ever have together. Elena, he said as she reached the elevator. Can I ask you something? What? During those few weeks before you left for Europe, did any of it feel real to you? Elena met his eyes, and for a moment, her carefully controlled expression wavered. It doesn't matter now, does it? It matters to me. Why? Because somewhere in the middle of our fake relationship, I started having real feelings for you. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Damien, I know our situations are impossible. I know we come from different worlds. But what I felt when we were together, especially that day at Carnegie Hall, that wasn't acting. Please don't say things like that. It just makes everything more complicated. More complicated than it already is? Elena pressed the elevator button. We stick to the plan. One public appearance, then we go our separate ways. It's better for both of us. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. Better doesn't always mean right, Damien said as the doors began to close. The week leading up to the benefit concert was tense. Media speculation about their relationship reached fever pitch. Some outlets claimed they'd already broken up secretly. Others insisted they were more in love than ever and were planning a wedding. Damien threw himself into work, staying at the office until late every night. But he couldn't stop thinking about Elena's question at the elevator. It doesn't matter now, does it? It mattered to him more than he'd expected. Over the past few months, Elena had become more than just a beautiful woman he was fake dating. She'd become someone he genuinely admired, someone whose opinions he valued, someone he looked forward to seeing and talking to. The night of the benefit concert, Damien arrived at Lincoln Center in a black tuxedo, ready to play his part one final time. The venue was packed with New York's cultural elite, and he could feel eyes on him as he took his seat in the front row. When Elena walked onto the stage, the audience fell completely silent. She wore a stunning silver gown that caught the stage lights beautifully, and her hair was styled in an elegant updo. But it was her presence that commanded attention, the same powerful confidence he'd first noticed at the charity gala months ago. She sat at the piano and began to play the same Rachmaninoff concerto from the night they'd met. As the familiar melody filled the concert hall, Damien was transported back to that moment when he'd first been captivated by her talent. But tonight was different. Tonight, Elena played with even more passion and intensity than he'd ever heard before. Every note seemed to tell a story of heartbreak and resilience, of dreams achieved and dreams lost. As the piece built to its dramatic climax, Elena's eyes found his in the audience. For just a moment, it felt like she was playing only for him, pouring all her emotions into the music because she couldn't say the words out loud. When the final notes faded away, the audience erupted in the longest standing ovation Damien had ever witnessed. People were wiping tears from their eyes, calling out "Brava!" and applauding until their hands hurt. Elena stood and bowed gracefully, then looked directly at Damien and smiled. Not the careful, controlled smile from their business arrangement, but a real, genuine expression of joy and gratitude. In that moment, watching her triumph over the scandal and criticism, Damien realized something that changed everything. He wasn't just falling for Elena Vasquez. He was already completely hopelessly in love with her. And in 2 weeks, he was going to have to pretend to walk away from the only woman who had ever made him feel truly alive. As Elena left the stage to thunderous applause, Damien knew their carefully planned ending was about to become much more complicated, because real love doesn't follow business contracts, and his heart had decided it wasn't ready to honor their agreement to say goodbye. 2 weeks after Elena's triumphant performance at Lincoln Center, Damien sat in his office staring at the press release Rebecca had drafted announcing his amicable split from Elena. The words looked cold and businesslike on the page, nothing like the complicated emotions swirling in his chest. "The statement is perfect," Rebecca said, reviewing the document. "One final time. It makes you both look mature and professional. No blame, no drama, just two busy people who realize they're better as friends." Damien nodded absently, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about Elena's performance that night. The way she'd looked at him from the stage, the electricity he'd felt between them despite everything that had happened. "When do we release it?" he asked. Elena's publicist suggested Friday afternoon. Gets it into the weekend news cycle, but avoids the Monday business coverage. Right, makes sense. Rebecca studied his expression. You don't seem very happy about this. It's the right thing to do. For both of us. That wasn't what I asked. Before Damien could respond, his assistant knocked on the office door. Mr. Cross? There's a Carlos Vasquez here to see you. He says it's urgent. Damien and Rebecca exchanged surprised looks. Elena's father had never visited his office before, though they'd spoken on the phone several times during the media chaos. Send him in. Carlos Vasquez was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of running a business empire. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. Mr. Cross, he said, shaking Damien's hand firmly. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Of course. Please sit down. Can we get you anything? Just a few minutes of your time. Carlos settled into the chair across from Damien's desk. I understand you and my daughter are planning to announce the end of your relationship. That's right. We think it's best for everyone involved. Carlos was quiet for a moment, studying Damien's face. Do you love her? The direct question caught Damien off guard. I'm sorry? It's a simple question. Do you love my daughter? Damien glanced at Rebecca, who looked equally surprised by the turn in conversation. Mr. Vasquez, I respect Elena tremendously, but our relationship was complicated from the beginning. We've decided. I didn't ask what you've decided. I asked if you love her. There was something in Carlos's tone that demanded honesty. Damien met the older man's eyes and spoke from his heart. Yes, I love her very much. Carlos nodded as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. And do you think she loves you? I hope so, but it doesn't matter. We come from different worlds. Our relationship started under false pretenses. Elena's career is just recovering from the scandal. The smart thing is for us to step back. The smart thing, Carlos repeated. You know? I built my business empire by always choosing the smart thing over the risky thing. Safe investments, calculated moves, careful planning. That's served you well, has it? Carlos leaned back in his chair. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have hotels in every major city in the world. I have the respect of my peers and the fear of my competitors. That's quite an accomplishment. And I'm miserable. The admission hung in the air between them. Rebecca quietly excused herself from the room. I lost my wife 12 years ago, Carlos continued. Elena's mother was the love of my life, the one person who made me feel truly alive. After she died, I threw myself into work because it was easier than dealing with the grief. I'm sorry for your loss. Do you know what I regret most? All the times I chose work over time with Maria. All the vacations I postponed. The concerts I missed. The quiet evenings I sacrificed for business meetings. Damien was beginning to understand why Carlos was here. I watched Elena perform at Lincoln Center 2 weeks ago, Carlos said. I saw the way she looked at you in the audience. I saw the way you looked at her. That's not fake, Mr. Cross. That's not a business arrangement. Elena deserves better than the chaos that follows me around. She's a serious artist who should be judged on her talent, not her relationships. Elena deserves to be happy. And from what I can see, you make her happy. Her career will survive. She's brilliant and talented and strong. She'll rebuild whatever this scandal damaged. Carlos leaned forward. But if you let her walk away because you think it's the smart business decision, she might not forgive you. And you might not forgive yourself. After Carlos left, Damien couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept thinking about the older man's words, about regrets and missed opportunities, about the difference between smart choices and right choices. That evening, he found himself walking past Elena's apartment building. He'd done this several times over the past 2 weeks, never quite working up the courage to go inside. Tonight, he almost kept walking again. Then he saw her through the large windows on the 4th floor, sitting at her piano. Even from the street, he could see her fingers moving across the keys, though he couldn't hear the music through the glass. Before he could change his mind, he walked into the building and climbed the stairs to her floor. Elena answered her door wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked surprised to see him. Damien, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Before we make our announcement tomorrow. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. Her apartment was exactly as he remembered. Warm, cluttered with sheet music, filled with the presence of her passion for music. I was just practicing, she said, gesturing toward the piano. Working on some new pieces. I heard you've been offered several new performance opportunities. Yes. It seems the scandal actually increased interest in my playing. Strange how these things work. They stood awkwardly in her living room, both aware that this would likely be one of their last private conversations. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. What? If we hadn't gotten caught up in this media mess, if Victoria Sterling hadn't interfered, if our arrangement had ended the way we originally planned, do you think we might have had a real chance together? Elena looked down at her hands. Damien, what's the point of asking that now? The point is that I'm in love with you, and I think you might have feelings for me too. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. I know we agreed to end this, Damien continued. I know it's the sensible thing to do, but I've spent my whole life making sensible decisions, and I've never been truly happy until I met you. We barely know each other. Everything between us has been complicated by contracts and publicity, and I know that you take your coffee with just a little bit of cream and no sugar. I know that you hum Beethoven when you're thinking. I know that you bite your lip when you're nervous, and that you have a small scar on your left hand from when you were 8 and tried to rescue a cat from a tree. Elena stared at him in amazement. How do you know that about the scar? Because I pay attention to you. Because every moment we've spent together, even the ones that were supposed to be fake, have been the realest moments of my life. Tears were forming in Elena's eyes. This is impossible, Damien. We signed agreements. We have a plan. Forget the agreements. Forget the plan. I'm asking you, Elena Vasquez, not as part of any arrangement or contract, but as a man who has fallen completely in love with you. Will you give us a real chance? Elena walked to her windows, looking out at the city lights below. Do you know what my mother used to tell me when I was little and afraid to perform? What? She said that music is about taking risks. That the most beautiful moments come when you stop worrying about making mistakes and just let yourself feel the music completely. That's good advice. Elena turned back to face him. I've been so afraid of making a mistake with you, of letting people think I'm not serious about my career, of proving my father right about getting involved with business people. And now I think maybe I've been so busy protecting my heart that I forgot to listen to it. She walked closer to him, until they were standing just a few feet apart. My heart says it doesn't care about contracts or media attention or what other people think, she continued. My heart says you're the first man who's ever looked at me and seen not just the pianist or the billionaire's daughter, but the real me. Your heart is very wise. My heart says it loves you too. The words hung between them for a moment, and then Damien stepped forward and pulled Elena into his arms. When he kissed her, it wasn't for photographers or publicity or business arrangements. It was just two people who had found something real in the middle of an elaborate pretense. When they finally broke apart, Elena smiled up at him with pure joy. So, what do we do about our press release tomorrow? She asked. We tear it up, and then what? Then we see where this goes. No contracts, no predetermined ending date, no lawyers involved. Just us. The media will go crazy. Let them. We'll figure it out as we go. Elena laughed, and the sound was like music to his ears. You realize this means I'll have to introduce you to more of my father's business colleagues? And you'll have to come to incredibly boring tech company board meetings. I can handle boring board meetings if you can handle my father's opinions about our relationship. Deal. 6 months later, Damien sat in the front row of Carnegie Hall watching Elena perform as a featured soloist with the New York Philharmonic. The concert was sold out, and critics were calling it one of the finest performances in the hall's history. As Elena played the final notes of her solo, she found his eyes in the audience and smiled, the same radiant smile she'd given him that first night when he'd shouted his ridiculous proposal across a crowded ballroom. After the concert, as Elena was surrounded by admirers and music industry people, Damien waited patiently at the edge of the crowd. When she finally broke away and walked toward him, still glowing with the triumph of her performance, he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Elena Vasquez, he said, dropping to one knee right there in the busy hallway backstage. I promised I'd marry you if you played. You've played beautifully. Not just tonight, but every day since I've known you. Will you marry me? Elena's hands flew to her mouth in surprise. Around them, people started realizing what was happening and pulling out their phones to record the moment. This time it's not a business arrangement, Damien continued. This time it's just a man who loves a woman asking her to spend her life with him. Elena's eyes were bright with tears of happiness. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone around them to hear. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. As Damien slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the crowd around them erupted in cheers and applause. Camera flashes went off, and somewhere in the distance, someone was live streaming the whole thing to social media. But this time, neither of them cared about the cameras or the publicity or what the headlines would say tomorrow. They were too busy being completely, authentically, wonderfully in love. 1 year later, they were married in a small ceremony at Elena's childhood home in Spain, with only their families and closest friends present. Elena's father walked her down the aisle while a string quartet played one of her favorite pieces. During their first dance as husband and wife, Elena whispered in Damien's ear, "Thank you for shouting across that ballroom. Thank you for playing," he whispered back. And as they swayed together under the Spanish stars, both of them knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most impulsive moments, and that the best contracts are the ones written not on paper, but in the heart.